The Chief of Defence Staff, General Anil Chauhan, he has acknowledged that India suffered losses during Operation Sindoor, but he refused to disclose a specific number. He emphasized that India learned from the experience and responded strongly. General Chauhan also highlighted that there is a space for conflicts below the nuclear threshold, indicating the complexities of modern warfare. His comments, it reflects India's cautious approach to military engagement and its commitment to strategic preparedness. My colleague Vishnu Shom joins us to get us more on this. Vishnu, can you please provide more context about what General Chauhan has said and the nature of the losses that he is talking about?
Well, General Chauhan, the Chief of Defence Staff, the topmost defence officer in this country, has been speaking at the Shangri-La Dialogue. It's an international security dialogue being hosted in Singapore. And in response to questions from Reuters, from Bloomberg, and I believe in an interview to CNN, which may appear quite soon, he's been asked questions on Indian losses suffered during the Op Sindoor operations. Now, without getting into the numbers of aircraft that India has potentially lost, he did say that the Indian Air Force did learn from tactical errors or mistakes or issues which may have existed and came back strong in the operations. And ultimately, it's the ends, the end of the operation and what was ultimately achieved, which actually really does explain where India stands and the Indian Armed Forces stand as far as these operations are concerned. Remember, this is not the first time that an Indian general or a senior officer is being asked about Indian losses. There was an Air Marshal, the Director General of Air Operations, who in a press conference in Delhi had been asked very specifically whether India had sustained the losses of military aircraft during the initial phases of Op Sindoor, to which the answer was that all of our pilots managed to get back. In other words, they were all okay. I've also been able to independently corroborate that all of our pilots are okay, but there's never been an official statement on the number of fighter aircraft that India lost. And even now, there is no clarity on that, with the general not getting into numbers, but saying, look at what the end result was. So this is the position of the government. It's been a fairly consistent position, but it is now confirmed, at least in the eyes of the international media, that there have been losses to Indian aircraft. But with the Indian Air Force spokesperson a couple of weeks back saying that all our pilots are okay, it essentially implied the same thing. So that's one aspect of it. He also did speak about, and you mentioned this, operations or a war beneath the nuclear threshold, where he said that there was a certain space which exists. This, some would suggest, are remarks which need to be looked at quite closely and carefully, because the implication, and the general said as much, was that Pakistan was a rational actor and that they didn't do anything irrational, which would suggest that they would move to a nuclear threshold or they would use potentially nuclear weapons. Some would, however, argue that Pakistan's targeting of civilian areas in Poonch and elsewhere, was not the act of a civilian of a rational leadership. It was the act, perhaps, of a desperate leadership. But those are remarks that we're going to have to analyze. But these are important remarks made in an international forum on Op Sindoor by India's topmost military leader.
Absolutely. And speaking about the rationality of in thoughts and action, as he put it, especially as you also mentioned, there is a space that exists for conflict below the nuclear threshold. How does General Chauhan's statement reflect India's overall approach to military engagements here?
Well, that's a very important question. And I think what India has said, and not just at the level of the military, but also at the level of the government, the political leadership, diplomats, others, that India will not be blackmailed by Pakistan on the nuclear front. There will be no nuclear blackmail. And Pakistan has resorted to the nuclear blackmail, not just on this occasion when they've said that, look, we're a nuclear power and we will do anything to defend ourselves. They've made statements like this in the past as well. But at some level, the sense would be that this is essentially bluster. And one would hope that that assumption is correct, because the last thing anybody would want is some sort of a nuclear exchange between nuclear armed neighbors. But the government believes, and the reason that Op Sindoor did take place is because Pakistan had to be sent a very direct message, and that there has been, or there is, a certain space which exists beneath that nuclear threshold. Thus far, that premise has been valid, and it is a fact that both sides didn't approach or come anywhere close to looking at that option in the brief war that took place, if we can use the word war.